to officially start. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for giving us some time on a Saturday afternoon in January. We're glad that the sun showed, so I think that was encouraging for our day. My name is Joanna Hahn. I'm the Central Region Director for State Historic Sites with the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites, and have the pleasure of being the site manager at the Levi and Catherine Coffin State Historic Site in Fountain City. We're excited that we're here to hear from a panel that we've arranged today, and in a few moments I'll introduce the panel. But hopefully everybody has access to biographies of our panelists. I tried to leave those on the chairs as everybody was coming in, so you can read a little more, but I'll do a little introduction here in a few moments. But before we begin officially, I want to give a few words of thanks. First and foremost to our host, the Wayne County Historical Museum, for allowing us to use the community building today. When I first approached the initial conversations for this program, I knew my little theater at the historic site was not going to suffice. I really felt that the community would come out for this, and you definitely proved that. So we couldn't be all here together with this space. And so I want to thank Bill Bunch, the director, and his staff, who have been practically helping us get things started here on time. Next, I definitely have to give a huge shout out to Marlene Lindsay and the Black Legacy Project of Wayne County for their willingness to partner with us on this program. So Marlene is the one who I came to with the idea, and of course Marlene, being in the community, knew exactly who to approach and to help bring this together, and of course the organization has been such a tremendous benefit to our county in the short history they've had so far in what they're doing to collect and share Black history. So thank you for being so receptive to the idea. And of course I want to thank our panelists as well, so I appreciate it. So to begin, Wayne County, Indiana has a deep history with civil rights. At the Levi and Catherine Coffin State Historic Site, we focus on the county's earliest history with civil rights through the work of individuals like Levi and Catherine Coffin. They were part of a dedicated group of individuals who both publicly spoke out against slavery and challenged fellow citizens and neighbors to do the same. But it was their actions that are more remembered for today as they put their anti-slavery beliefs into practice to support what we call today one of our nation's first battles for civil rights, the Underground Railroad. The Coffins never denied any runaway slaves assistance while fleeing from slavery, and today we wish to give attention to others in Wayne County who use those words and actions to create change. Our nation has faced moments where challenging or even breaking the law was the only way to help move barriers in the name of equality and equity. That fight continues even today. Mark Twain once said that history never repeats itself, but it often rhymes. Similar themes and patterns happen throughout the eras, which offer us a chance to learn and grow as a society. Today's program is a chance for us to reflect on our own local histories, and as a way to remind ourselves how far we've come, but also recognize there's still work to be done. So to aid in our understanding, we've reached out to several here in our community whose own families were part of that fight. We have provided biographies, as I mentioned, of all three of our panelists. Today we're going to hear from Patricia Brown, the daughter of Robert and Geraldine Smith. We will hear about the work her father Robert, who was a founding member of the NAACP chapter here in Richmond, accomplished, sometimes at personal cost. Cynthia Sawyer is the daughter of George and Jackie Sawyer. Her father George was a local lawyer who worked to use the law in peaceful protests to face racism in Wayne County. Our final panelist, Dr. Lucinda Wright, is the youngest of 4 children born to Warren G. and Mamie L. Wright. Many of you may recognize Dr. Wright through her role with the Townsend Center and as city councilor here in the city of Richmond. Wright's mother, Mamie, was committed to both community service and social justice. So our panelists are going to be asked questions regarding the work of their parents, but also to reflect on their thoughts and memories of that fight for civil rights. So the way I have this set up, some of these questions are more general, so any of the panelists are welcome to reflect on those. Some of them are targeted specifically to them and their families' specific experience. And then once those questions are completed, if panelists are okay with it, we'll open it up to the audience and see what kind of questions our community has as well. So I am going to begin with a few general questions to the whole panel. As children growing up, Were you aware of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, or of your parents' commitment to civil rights? So the microphone's right there in front of Cynthia, and feel free to pass it around as.
I'll go first. My father was very clear about the things he's involved with. And I've mentioned this story a few times before. We had a picture of Martin Luther King in our hallway.
We can't hear.
Oh, sorry.
Hold it up.
Is that better? Is that okay? Okay. We had a picture of Martin Luther King in our hallway. And it was one, I don't know why, but it was a photo where his eyes seemed to travel and follow you through the hallway. It was as though Martin Luther King looked over our home. I remember the night, even though I was only 8 years old, I remember the night when King died. Because my father was crying, I didn't understand why. And my grandmother, who was a very strong, stern woman, called him. He was leaving. I'm not sure where he was going, but he was leaving. And my mother was trying to get him in the house, get him to stay in the house. And my grandmother called him and told him to stay at home. And he just broke down and cried so much. And I never forgot that. And I knew that that was something that broke my father's heart in a way that I'd never seen. I knew that he was gone a lot. I didn't really understand all that he was doing, but I knew he was gone a lot. And I knew that a lot of the people that he had as clients were folks who were otherwise not going to be represented well. So I knew those things.
Growing up with Mamie as my mother in the 60s, we were aware. She made sure. Can you hear me now? Okay. She made sure that we were aware that no matter what we did, we had to be better than our non-black counterparts. She said it wasn't fair, but it was fact. So I have always kept that in mind, even when raising my children, who are all now adults, and my grandchildren. We were aware that at that time, during the 60s, we were aware that as blacks, and living in North Richmond, not only being black, but we lived in North Richmond, that folks didn't look too kindly upon us. Patty and I just had a conversation right before this started about that, and but we knew that we had to strive to be the best of the best. So she made that plainly clear.
As long as I can remember, I've always been aware of the civil rights movement. If it wasn't for my dad, every day someone was calling in, coming by, wanted to know what they should do, when they should do it, and if they should do it. And I don't think you guys will ever understand what my dad went through, trying to protect us and trying to help other people. I'm going to go off script after a while, and I'm going to tell you some of the things. And I'm going to try to talk as Patty Brown and not Bobby Smith. So you guys, I have to bear with me, okay?
Thank you for sharing. So the next question is, what type of work did you witness your parents or communities involved in speaking up for civil rights? And did you understand what this work aimed to accomplish?
Say that again.
Sure. What type of work did you witness your parents or communities' involvement in speaking up for civil rights? You can reflect on your parents or just the community you were part of. And what did you understand, and did you understand what this work aimed to accomplish?
At that time, I was young when a lot of that stuff was going on in the 50s and 60s. But I do remember having to pass out handbills all over the North End. Krinka, she ain't, oh, there she is, Krinka, she helped pass them out. But Daddy would have them all written up, and we would go from door to door to door, passing out these handbills, encouraging people to come to the meetings and to make them aware of what is going on, what really wasn't going on, but needed to be going on.
My mother was the president of the NAACP for 30-plus years. Not only that, she was a union steward. So the things that were going on back then and what she did, a woman during those things, it was not. It was mainly men, but my mom, strong, determined individual. She worked her butt off, and like Patty said, you would not imagine the things that she went through to do the work that she was chosen to do. I don't think I think what she did, it chose her. I don't think she actually chose it, because what Patty said, being the president of NAACP, she was getting phone calls day and nights when we had the riots, day and night here. It was unsettling for me as a child, because you hear the threats, you see what's going on. It was unreal. It was truly unreal. So
when I was, I think, in first grade, my father would tell all these stories of the legal stuff that he was doing. By that time, we were living in Indianapolis, and he was the head of legal services there. And I remember this story of a woman who was a client of his, who was young, and she had a child, and my father said that the landlord consistently would not provide for this woman. And as a kid, I was like, okay, fine. He's like, there's not hot water. I'm like, uh-huh. But then he began to tell the stories of what was really going on. Her child was not able to sleep in the bed because rats were biting the child every night. And so the mother put the child in a high chair in the bathtub with water around it at night so the child would not be bitten. And so I knew that from a young age that those are the kinds of things my dad was doing. And I also knew that he would sometimes sneak me to meetings, I'm still not sure why, to secret meetings that were happening with legislators and such. And so I'd be there sitting around looking at these people that I'd see on TV, not really understanding what was happening. So I knew he was doing things to try to make things better. I knew that things were wrong, and I knew he was trying to make things better.
So Cynthia, you can hold on to the microphone because we're going to do some targeted questions towards you. Your father challenged discrimination at local restaurants and other businesses here in Richmond who refused to serve African Americans. What type of reflections did your father share with you about trying to accomplish this starting? I think you started in 1858 or around that time. So is there anything there that...
The first thing I'll share is that my father had a really bad stutter as he grew up. And I think a lot of people didn't necessarily regard him as someone that was thoughtful because of the stutter. They knew he was smart in some ways, but the stutter was really in his way. And he went to Earlham, and he made it through Earlham, but then he went to Howard. And when he got to Howard, it was the first time that a speech therapist worked with him. and worked at the Stutter. So this guy who had been a stutterer his whole life became a lawyer, very articulate at it. I remember stories of how he said he came to Richmond to restaurants after he graduated that would not serve black people. And he brought his law books and would pound them on the counter and say, "You must serve me." My father really loved the law. He believed in the law in a way that I didn't understand when I was young. And he believed the law would change things. He knew that there were hearts and minds, but he believed that the law was a sword and a shield. And so, yes, I knew those stories. And he was not doing it only for the people in the community. He believed that his kids were the dream. He believed that our generation would attain freedom. And that if he didn't do those things, that would not happen.
Your father was a practicing Quaker.
Yes.
Correct? Yes. And he challenged white Quakers to recognize the power they had to create change. How did your father try and build relationships with local white residents, whether they were Quaker or non-Quaker, to help build support in the community?
I think that being a Quaker was one of the delights and frustrations of his life. He explained that he became a Quaker because he thought that there was a forum to attain freedom. And I think that most of the Quakers that he associated with had that in their minds. But I think that some of the structural things that he had hoped to address were very challenging to get through. He told me this story that it was a little weird. One time a woman was walking past our house from Earlham. There was an alumni thing, and there's a white woman there, very beautiful. I saw her across, I was looking through the window, doing dishes. And so then she went off, and my father said, "Did you see that woman out there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "She was almost your mother." I wasn't quite sure how I felt about that. And so apparently, this woman and my father had a great love affair. And I think had he been able to, he would have married her. But her father, who was somewhere in Quaker hierarchy, which they're not really supposed to have, but the Quaker hierarchy, basically let her know that she would be cut off completely from the family if she were to do this. And so then my father got called in to discuss the situation, and the only thing that the guy would accept was that my father leave Earlham. And so what they did was they had him move out of a dorm at Earlham and move across the street. And so he lived there. And so like I said, it was heartbreaking. There was so much potential, but then there was also a lot of heartbreaking stuff.
As a lawyer, how did your father try and provide support to local civil rights initiatives through existing law?
Too much.
Yeah.
I remember one day my father, I don't know if this is civil rights law exactly, but my father came home with a huge Kirby sweeper with all the different attachments. And my mother was frustrated, and I didn't understand what their whole thing was. Eventually, what I understood was that the guy that my father was defending couldn't really afford to pay him, but had a Kirby dealership, and so gave him the sweeper instead. My father really believed, like I said, he believed in the freedom of the law. And he believed that in situations people could be freed from their circumstance and unrighteousness. So, yeah, he did all kinds of things to try to help to make sure that people's rights were protected. And this is the last thing I'll share. I remember one night my father and mother were arguing in bed. I was trying to sleep, but they were arguing because someone had called, and it was in jail. And I don't think the person should have been in jail necessarily, but my mother was saying, you know, it's too early in the morning. It was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I heard my father saying, "The judge is in bed, the bondsman's in bed. Go to bed. I'll talk to you tomorrow." And so I think that he used the law as much as he could to help people get the freedom they deserve.
Thank you. Yeah, I had to write down what you said, freedom of the law. I think sometimes it's a concept we don't always connect, and I appreciate that perspective. Dr. Wright, we're going to move to you now. Your mother, Mamie, was a local leader and one-time chapter president of the NAACP here in Richmond. And how did your mother see a connection between both service and justice initiatives?
My mom, she was a true servant leader.
That button sensitive.
Right in front of you. I think the button is sensitive. Can you hear me now? Okay. My mom was a true servant leader. She would help anyone who is, that their civil rights, their, even if those that are being incarcerated, she's been known to call attorneys, both local and out of town. She believed in justice for everybody, fairness, equality for everyone. I remember when we had the riots here, and at her viewing, Byron Clutie, at the time, was, when we had the riots, was the mayor. And I will not ever forget my mom saying, I'm going off script, I'm going to be Mamie for a minute. She called Byron, and her words, what she said to him, because some young men had been beat up and put in jail by the police. And she called Byron and she said, this is like at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, get your ass over here now. And someone asked Byron, well, what did you do? He said, I got my ass to Mamie's house. When she calls and she says that, you go. So she truly believed in both service and justice initiatives.
In a 1986 Palladium Item article, your mother, Mamie, reflects on the question of how Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. influenced how she raised you and your siblings. In that article, she's quoted saying, I'd have to say yes. I've tried to teach my children the right way to solve problems. Can you reflect on those lessons she passed to you?
Every situation has a consequence, is what we were taught. And there's 3 sides to every story. Their side, my side, and the rights, and the truth. She always said, you can catch more bees with honey than you can vinegar. But the biggest thing was, you don't have to fight. You don't pick it, but you can finish it. And that didn't necessarily mean by violence, because the one thing that sticks in my mind, and I say this constantly, I say it to folks on city council, I say it to folks on our board at Townsend, my children, the children we serve at Townsend, and my grandchildren. You can say volumes by not saying a word. And I think, based on Dr. King's nonviolence, I think that was one of the biggest things that she took from that and that she instilled in us. Now, mind you, I used to have the last word all the time. As I have seasoned, it's not even worth it. My peace, protect my peace. So.
One initiative your mother was devoted to was affordable housing. How has her legacy continued to support that concept as this continues to be an issue for many Americans?
Oh yeah, it's a big issue, and it's one that I have an issue with here locally. Ever since I was appointed to City Council in 21, that has always been something that I have said, and they try to kind of dismiss it. But I'm still speaking out against it, so much so that what my brother and I and my children and nephews and nieces have done, we established an endowment fund for people who own homes to try to help them to do home improvements. Because a lot of times, as a homeowner, it's difficult to get the funding that you need to make repairs. That's because of A, where you live, B, your age, C, the color of your skin. I just experienced that here last year. And said something to the bank, the local bank, about it. So one of the things that we have done is through Townsend established an endowment fund, and it's $5,000, and we've done it. This will be our third year to do it, to give that grant away. But that has always been a big issue, especially north of those Northeast Street tracks. I have screamed and shouted, and I will continue to scream and shout until they do some things. They've done them out in the Vail district, which part of that is my district. But I want to see something done down here north of those Northeast Street tracks. So that is a part of her legacy. I guess that's a part of me because I've seen it and I heard it for years as a child. And if you go north, if you go over those tracks, you'll see a lot of vacant, empty lots. You will also see some houses that still have good bones. So rather than them tearing them down, spend some of that money to fix those houses up and sell them, or give citizens low interest rate loans or the block grants that they have not had on that side of town in over 30, I think it's 38, 39 years now. They haven't done anything like that. They haven't done the block grants. So we need to pressure our city government and to get up off some of that money that they're giving elsewhere and using for branding to do what they need to do in North Richmond.
Thank you. We're going to pass it on to Patty. Okay. Patty, like Mimi Wright, your father, Bobby Smith, was not only affiliated with the NAACP, was the chapter's founder here in Richmond. Why did your father feel the chapter would be important for the city of Richmond to have?
Short and to the point, fairness, jobs, and awareness to the people.
Thank you. Your father was instrumental in organizing a picket line protest at the SS Cresty Company store here in Richmond, and he called that day as perhaps the happiest day of his life. You are aware of what objectives the picket line had that day, and why do you think your father was so proud of it?
Okay, I'm going to read this article that was in the paper. It says, More than 350 people gathered at Townsend Center on the night of April the 8th, 1960. They were there to help support picketing Kresge's. 350 people showed up that night, okay? Roland Doc Cutter was the mayor at that time. When he learned of that, he called my dad. No, he didn't call my dad. He came down to the house, and he pleaded with Dad to call it off. And Dad said no. Yeah, he really did say no. Anyway, the next day at 10 o'clock, now remind you, 350 people there were the night before. 10 o'clock the next day, we were supposed to be at Kresge's to picket the line. 17 people showed up. 17. That's all. They promised Dad he would be there, but they backed down when they were afraid. One of the 17 people was Krinka. She lived next door. That's one of my best. The blacks were scared, and Dad, he kept saying, let's just go forward, let's just go forward. And then before it was all over with, early students showed up. That was the 17. And before it was all over, I think we ended with like 60 people because they were afraid. They wanted the outcome of it, but they were afraid. And that's what happened to Daddy all the time. Anytime Daddy had something, they would step back and let Dad do it. Let him do it.
Sure.
I'm going off script right now. He did.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We did without. Dad never had a job, never had a job. I don't even know how we survived, but we never was on welfare. But evidently somebody was bringing us food and stuff because we had that commodity cheese, which was good. Mama did sewing for people, and some of you people are just probably too young to know, but she taught us, and Mom did this, to stretch curtains. Did you guys know what stretch curtains were? She sewed for people. Mom was good. Mom was a good lady. But you guys just don't know what Dad sacrificed. I mean, he really sacrificed. And just, I'm going off script again.
I know, because my next question is,
Okay.
what was the personal cost?
I tell you
Right,
what.
so, yeah.
Dad was friends with Mayor Cooley. He did hire him, and Andy Cecere, Frank Marino, and Phil Marino. And you guys recognize this name, Birchby? He was friends with Daddy. He would call Daddy, and we could hear them talk. We could hear them talk all the time. But Dad was blackballed. I mean, he was blackballed. He could not get a job. He could get you a job, but they would not hire him. They would not hire him. Like I said, Mom did day work. She cleaned people's houses. Me and my sister, we passed papers to get money for our senior clothes. I tried to get all my friends they were getting jobs at the hospital, candy stripers, and working in the cafeteria. Never did hire us. Wouldn't hire us. And then I can remember one time, my two brothers, now y'all listen to this, my two brothers went to Tivoli Theater. Other people have taken credit for this. And you guys wonder why we have attitudes sometimes. You don't know how many times people would take credit for what Dad would do. Yeah, I was there. No, you wasn't there. You wasn't. Only 17 people was there. But anyway, my two brothers went to Tivoli Theater with two of their friends across the street. They were white. Okay. One of my brothers is brown, and one of my brothers is light complected. They made Mikey sit downstairs where the white people, made my brother go upstairs where the black people were. Well, they came home and told my dad what was going on. Well, Dad goes to the theater, and that was the end of that. You can sit where you wanted to. Okay? Like I said, I just hate people taking credit for what Dad did. The other thing is, the low-income apartments, what is it, Westwood, Norwood, Southview, who am I forgetting? Yeah, that was red. Anyway, they were named Norwood, Southview, Westview. Never did name anything after Daddy, never did. And then a couple, 2 or 3 years later, they decided to name Norwood Apartments the Bobby Smith Apartments. And you know yourself, when something is named once, that's what it's going to be. You can put anybody's name on it. Like we know who put their name on something. It's always going to be that. So you wonder why our family sometimes is hurt and have attitude. It's supposed to, you know. And there's a lot of times when there's functions here in Richmond and me and my sister don't want to attend. We don't attend because we know we're going to hear lies, people taking credit for what Dad did. This is a good one. This is really I can remember when Robert Kennedy came and Mom and Dad was on the committee. Now, I wish I bought that picture. And it was so nice. They were included them in the welcoming committee. So I go out with them. Mom and Dad's in the motor grade. I don't have a ride to get back in town because we were out at the Boston airport. So they put me in the car with the Secret Service. Right back to Secret Service. But the last thing I want to say is, picture this. Seriously, picture this. There's 6 of us kids. And it got dark out. And we noticed there was a couple cars in front of our house all day long. And it got dark. Now picture this, it got dark. Mom and Dad shut the windows, shut the curtains. We didn't know what was going on. Pretty soon, the lights went out on I Street. Yeah, they went out, it was dark. And then we hear a knock on the door. It's the FBI. Like this, we had to sit on the couch while they searched the house, talked to Daddy. But we're not supposed to be affected by all this.
Sure.
We were afraid. They accused Daddy of being a communist. And even after all that, Daddy still stood up for his rights and everybody else's rights. So that's what I want to say. You guys may think or thought Daddy was a hellraiser. He was.
He was.
He was. But as Harold Bledsoe said in this little article right here, as Harold Bledsoe, the late unofficial historian of Black Richmond, once said, every black man in this town should be indebted to Bobby Smith. Thank you.
I'd like to add something.
Sure.
When she said people took credit for what I always called him Mr. Bobby Smith did, being a community activist, a civil rights activist, and a lawyer who is black. Those are thankless jobs. Those are thankless jobs. They don't get, the individuals who do those things, they don't get their just due. People constantly try to tear them down and discredit them for what they have given and sacrificed to the community. It is, just keep in mind, it is a thankless job, and what the families of these individuals went through.
Thank you. And it kind of segues into my next question, which Patty touched on, was her mother. Because, you know, we're talking about people who were married, that had families, and obviously that affected spouses as well. And so, Cynthia, I don't know if you have any reflections on the experience your mother had through your father's work, if that affected her in some way, or just to the panel in general, just how women were encouraged to be involved, to use their voice and their agency during this period.
My brother makes documentary films, and I've been all over him to make a film of the wives of civil rights leaders.
There you go.
I think they have many untold stories, and it wasn't until, wow, about 10 or 15 years ago that I understood that my mother believed the same things my father believed. She was just at home raising us. She would have been out there had it not been for us. And one of the things that I've thought a lot about recently, because my mom is almost 90 years old now, and I've thought about how she didn't realize that she was doing civil rights all the time. So when, like I said, we lived in Indianapolis for a few years, and my mother was getting me involved in Campfire Girls. There weren't lots of brownies there, lots of Campfire Girls. And so I was going to be a bluebird, yay. And so my mother went up to the group leader and asked her where she could buy the uniform for the bluebirds. And the woman directed her toward used clothing shops. And my mother said, no, I can buy her a new uniform. And the woman didn't believe that or understand that. And yes, I got a very new uniform. I think that all the time, the women were left in situations to deal with neighbors sometimes, deal with terror. During the riots that Lucinda's talked about a few times, they were going to blow up our house, and so my father called the police, and the person called the house again, saying you need to get more police there because we're going to blow you up. And our home is a ranch, and the kids' bedrooms are on the end. And my parents were terrified because houses were being blown up during that time. I think the women of the civil rights movement, in some ways, are more heroic than the men, because they're the ones that had to keep the fires going on at home. They're the ones that had to fill in the gaps when the fathers weren't there. And like I said, I think they believed just as strongly as the men did. They just were unseen heroes.
So the final questions I have are for the whole family. So again, chime in where if you feel you'd like to share. What lessons did you learn from your parents and your community, which today you're trying to pass down to younger generations, or just trying to get them to understand?
The lesson that I've learned through all this from my dad, if you start something, you better be well sure you're going to be standing by yourself. Because if you think they're going to be there, they say they're going to be there, they're not going to be there. Don't expect someone else to stand up with you or for you. You better have your little act together because you're going to be standing alone, as far as I'm concerned.
What I learned from my mom is commitment. When you start something, you have to finish it. That's one thing. If we joined something or we started a project as children, you have to see it to the end. You cannot, we could not drop out. That was, you just couldn't do that. And so the one thing that I take from all of this back in the day, I lived around the corner from the Smiths. And I still do. I still do live in the same house that I was born in. And we had in North Richmond, and Minnie Sue used to live around the corner on North J Street, 1100 block of North J Street. During that time frame in Kringa, we had that village mentality that is missing today. And that village mentality was this: if this household had bread, this household over here had peanut butter, and this household back here had milk, everybody in the neighborhood ate. Not only that, if I was caught cussing, because as a kid I cussed like a sailor, if I got caught cussing from Mr. Bobby Smith and Miss Geraldine, trust you me, I got chastised by them. Not only did I get chastised by them, they then in turn called my mom. And I would catch it when I got home. Again, that village mentality. The Bible tells us, because back then everybody, times were rough. Times were rough. Jobs were not plentiful, and black folks weren't making the same amount of money as non-black folks doing the same job. So we struggled. Yeah, you're right, Crinkle. We still struggle. The Bible tells us in Deuteronomy 15:11 that we will always have the poor. And it is our responsibility to help one another. That's that village mentality. The Bible speaks of the village mentality. That's the village mentality. So what we need to do, whether you're black, white, pink, purple, polka dot with antennas, we have to work together. Be that village. When you see wrong, you stand up for the wrong. Bobby Smith did. George Sawyer did. Mamie Wright did. Regardless of what the flat was. I do today. Somebody probably report me, city council, for what I said. I may be impeached. I don't know. But right is right and wrong is wrong. And we need to stand up against the injustices.
My father desperately wanted me to become a lawyer. I did not love the law. And I think his biggest fear was that I was a very quiet kid. He didn't quite know what was going on inside me. But he was afraid that I was going to just kind of go off and live my life. And I ended up at the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf in the late 80s and the early 90s. And during that time, Philadelphia had an area in North Philadelphia that was called the Badlands. And that it had the greatest number of drug users in a concentrated block in the world. And we had kids who were not being fed, who were not being clothed. I have gone to homes where you couldn't see what was happening because it was so dark, and there were drug dealers all over. And these deaf kids are living in these spaces. And what my parents didn't realize, and it looks like it's for all of us, that the treasures were planted inside us. And it's when the opportunity comes and that stuff comes out. We fed those kids, we bathed those kids, we clothed those kids, we made sure that they had lives that were worthy of them. And I still have one of them that calls me Mom. And so they gave us eyes to see things, to know what was right and what was wrong. My poor mother one day, she desperately wanted me to move back here. Aren't there deaf kids in Richmond or Indiana? And I said, yes, but they're not the same as in Philadelphia, Mom. She said, but you weren't raised that way. I said, yeah, that's why I need to be there. So the things I was given in Richmond allowed me to pour out there in Philadelphia.
So I've got a couple more questions.